Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to our webinar this morning on bringing it all together, managing in an age of crisis. My name is Michael Ibrahim, Program Manager within the Cultural Investment Portfolio at the Mass Cultural Council. We work with our nonprofit organizations, either through services and grants. And so I just see the attendee list. A lot of you have been with us all week long, so it's great to see you all. And really in this ultimate webinar that we're bringing you today of making sense of all of the conversations we've been having this week. So we started with that cash flow of understanding what's coming in and out weekly in our organization. Yesterday, we talked about different what-if scenarios. And then today, we're bringing it all together of really making decisions on our path forward. As always, we've got Sandi McKinley, Vice President of Advisory Services from the Nonprofit Finance Fund, to lead our webinar today. Our webinar is being recorded and will be available later this afternoon on our YouTube channel. You will all receive an email from me via Zoom when that is ready to go. Like always, Kaylin King, our program officer, is controlling our chat box. She will be sending you some resources throughout this conversation. Most importantly, Sandi has given the PowerPoint and also a template and a guide that is in our box already, so you can access this right away. And feel free to share that to as many folks as you want to share that with. We do use the Q&A box for questions. So as we come along, use the Q&A box. You can add them in. Sandi will be answering all the questions at the very end. So we'll be having that opportunity. What we'll say about the questions is, since this is our final unit, you may have other financial questions, either from our cash flow, our scenario building, or any other questions. We'll be getting a lot on the payroll protection and other types of financial questions. So it doesn't even have to be anything that we've talked about in this series. We really want you to have access to Sandi here and ask any financial questions you might have. So feel free, knowing that in our Q&A, anything financial, Sandi's here for you. If you want to ask those questions anonymously, because you may not want to associate your organization or your name with some of those questions, particularly if it's difficult questions, feel free to use that anonymous box, so that way we protect your identity there. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Sandi McKinley.
Thanks, Michael, and it's great to be here this morning, and so great to know that so many of you have been are returning and have been with us all week. So as you know, NFF has been really watching the pandemic and the crisis, and as it's playing out in the nonprofit sector and with our funders, and really thinking about how we can address it together. And then thinking too, again, since so many of you have been with us all week, really thinking about what we can do as leaders and managers of our organization to manage what we can control. And one of the view that we have is how can we think about our data? How can we be as transparent with the decision makers within our organization, our board, and look at that data to make to have good conversations, think through scenarios, and have make informed decisions about moving forward, and really trying to shake out the noise of things that aren't in our control. So that's the perspective. And of course, really reminding ourselves that we are much more than our financial bottom lines. The reason we get up in the morning is that we are mission-driven organizations, and that we are passionate about what we do. And our strength lies in our know-how, and our ability to put on our programs, to incite passion and incite emotion in our audiences. Our strengths of reputation and network and community, and certainly since we are a people serving people sector, and our people and all that they bring in helping us deliver our mission. And certainly money is a big part of that, and we recognize the anxiety that comes around with it, but hopefully what we will give, we will help organizations do and leaders do is be able to frame some conversations so that we can make some decisions, but also really bring the human part of the equation in, recognizing that we are much more than our bottom lines. And then again, realizing that we are just at the beginning of this crisis. We are just at the beginning. We are in the midst of the crisis. That we are in the response phase. addressing what is necessary for our organizations at this moment in time. And also recognizing that there's going to be a moment, and it's not going to be like a flip of a switch moment. It's going to be more of a transition moment. When we go to recovery, we get back, we go from response and crisis and to a moment of recovery where we will be coming back online or re-engaging in operations. And so we are tasked with this almost dual mandate of thinking about what it is that we need to operate now or shore up right now. And while we are thinking about what will it mean to operate in a changed environment moving forward? And frequently that will be quite overwhelming. I know it's overwhelming for me at times, but hopefully we can start to break that down a little bit as we are bringing everything together that we talked about this week, and give us some tools and guides for those conversations. And then finally, as review, recognizing that organizations right now are operating in one of three camps. Some organizations are fully operational or operating for the most part, delivering their mission, and they're operating in a changed environment because everything has changed right now. And we know from data, including the data by the council, that most arts and cultural organizations have paused operations and are facing a financial crisis. Some organizations are somewhere in the middle. And it's to the paused organizations that we are really speaking to in this webinar series. And really, that's the lens through which we are directing our work today and have been all week. So really thinking about the impact of being paused on our staff and thinking about the what does it mean for us to operate kind of in response like this. So if you've been with us this week, you have heard one of the things that we are advising, or one of the things that two factors that we are really considering as we respond in this moment that is just so uncertain and unusual and unprecedented, is the two factors around social distancing and how long that is going to take, not just in a sense of the public health orders or the public health suggestions around how long we social distance, but also the confidence of our clients and our audiences to re-engage in group activities, right? So what is the length of time which there is going to be social distancing or physical distancing is going to be a factor in our day-to-day operations, and what does that mean for our organizations? And the second factor is the impact of the economic recovery on our audiences, our clients, and our funders. And so it's with those two things that we are really starting to start our journey of scenario planning, and consider, what are those, when we put those two things together, and we enter through those doors of scenarios, how does that play out in our individual organizations? How are those things affecting our programs, our people, our community, and our finances? So if you weren't able to join us in webinar 3 or yesterday's webinar, I really suggest that you kind of go through, go through that and see how we have tackled that, and give you some suggestions for planning and budgeting. And finally, just recognizing that an organization's ability to adapt is unique to an organization and really what they are bringing into this moment in time. And and their ability to kind of mitigate and absorb risk at this moment is influenced by the availability of cash, and especially unrestricted cash that it has, the availability or access to reserves or line of credit, and it, and if, you know, organizations are able to access emergency funding, be they government programs or emergency grant funding, right? So that goes back to our second webinar around cash flow, and realizing that that is, you know, our really base for like our basis for understanding our, you know, our position is really, you know, our current cash position, and then having that conversation about our access to cash. We are at a moment in time where there is very little or no cash flowing through our system right now as a whole, especially in our sector. So just recapping on that, right now we are looking at three things. We are looking at the timing of our money, cash flow, scenarios, which is really trying to quantify our like what our contingencies are, what are our options, our what ifs, and then like budgeting, right? What does it look like for us in 3 months and 6 months and 9 months? And then how are we planning and monitoring that? Next, and what we should be thinking of, and in the forefront of our mind, is, you know, what are we going to need to recover? Now, recognizing that some of us might not be there yet to be thinking about that we're managing in the here and now, totally get it. But those of us who are able to think about what might be next, we should be thinking about, all right, what might we need to recover, and are we able to recover? And that's assessing what we will need to re-engage in operations after the pandemic subsides, and also that has a degree of uncertainty as well, because we don't know what that will really look like for us or how that will manifest for us. We can make some assumptions, and I think we're starting to think about what that will look like, you know, day by day. We're getting perhaps a clearer picture, or making some additional assumptions. So that's something that, as we are getting, you know, getting more information, that might become, we might gain additional clarity. So the name of this program, which I love, is Safe Harbor. And the concept is that organizations who are paused need a way to safely pause or anchor until it's feasible for us to re-engage in operations. And so what does that mean? Again, it means something different for each organization, but it's really oriented around maintaining your baseline operations and essential functions, so that you can you know, kind of protect the core of your organization until it's time to move forward. So it is like those essential functions are around maintaining your key relationships, stewarding the facilities. So again, depending on what that means for you, those essential human HR functions, you know, the essential artistic and creative functions, maintaining communications, IT, the back office, meaning like finance. So we recognize that might be one person fulfilling all those duties, or it might mean a larger team. So what do those baseline operations look for you, and how do you keep that, as a colleague of mine says, the essential hum going? We also recognize that there is a second reality for some organizations, which we're calling the soft landing, and that some organizations are realizing that returning to normal is not a viable option. And so their management and leadership is asking the really tough questions of what does it mean to close permanently, or what does it mean for our organization to close permanently, or what do we do if we're not able to re-engage again? So we're going to talk about, in our webinar today, we're going to talk about, you know, making that decision, what it means to kind of to close from a cost perspective. To close responsibly is not necessarily free, and also, you know, part of our financial story in a soft landing is communicating the news and stewarding the legacy. So today we will start that conversation for those of you who might be considering that. So diving in. The first, we've talked about kind of cash, we've talked about scenarios, we've talked about budgets. What we haven't necessarily talked about is decisions. And that's what we want to get to today. And decisions are tough, because I think we all have that experience of how do I enter into decision making when I have so many factors in front of me. So what I'm going to talk with you about now, or what we're going to talk about now, is saying, all right, let's think about, let's break down those different factors that can go into decision making that could help you and your board and your trusted advisors help give some structure to those two decisions. So for I will say in advance that there is really there's going to be trade-offs, right? There's no one perfect decision. So recognizing that I think sometimes we get stuck in decision paralysis because we're always looking for that unicorn. So I think sometimes we have to go with the best of the worst decision, and that my second point being that frequently decision making comes in a cycle of iteration, as does planning and scenario planning and budgeting. Like that we have to recognize that sometimes these things come in, frequently they come in cycles of iteration. So we are looking at when we are looking at decision making, we use a matrix oriented around mission, the degree of control, capacity, time horizon, risks, and financial impact. So we've seen this before when we were looking at scenarios yesterday, but I'm going to share with you a decision matrix specifically for making decisions in times of crisis. This is something that we've uploaded to the Dropbox as well. So it's an Excel spreadsheet that you can fill in yourself. My clients have found this to be incredibly helpful because I think, putting it down on a sheet of paper tends to allow us a little distance and allows for, I think, more fruitful discussion because it orders our thinking a little bit. So really thinking about, whatever the opportunity or scenario is, and then, thinking through, what do you have control over? What can you influence? Thinking of certainly the financial impact, the mission impact, like how aligned is it with mission? How, the likelihood and the time horizon. So what I will share is that where groups get, where there is frequently discussion is around that mission impact. And so one of the things that I would suggest in your conversations with your boards and trusted advisors is to really, define or hone in on what mission impact means. Does it mean number of people served? Does it mean type of programming? Does it mean continuation of a particular type of legacy? Ensure that there is try to ensure that there is agreement, or at least understanding of that definition of what of what mission impact means. It's often a good, and we'll talk about some tips for decision making a little further on in our time together today, but it's often a place where people get tripped up in decision making because people feel that they have different views around what needs to be carried forward from a perspective of mission. And that's not to say that there is one right answer. We just need to acknowledge that there are different perspectives. And then thinking about, all right, how do we plot out our opportunities? How do we plot out any scenarios, any actions on the decision matrix? Now, some of these might be simple, and I intentionally put a couple of simple opportunities here for demonstration reasons. So for example, converting restricted grants to operating dollars, right? You have some degree of control on that action, right? Because you have to ask, that's your degree of control. The funder has to answer, that's the degree that's not in your control. It might have, a certain amount of impact depending on the, percentage of your overall budget that it contributes to. Depending on what, depending on what it is or where it falls, it could have a high or low impact on your mission. And this board decided that it was going to have a high impact. It impacts your intermediate time horizon, and it's a maybe. It's a 50-50 shot on whether or not it will occur, because you are really, you're really waiting on a funder to give you an answer. Another, one that is a little bit more, say realistic or nuanced would be, thinking about an opportunity around a new online program for students. You have direct control on this, for example, because this is something that it's your genesis, it's your ability to direct. The financial impact, it's low or none because there are startup costs, and then there are expenses related to it. There's a feeling that there is a high mission impact because there's a connection with students and constituents. The time horizon is, pretty soon, and there's a high likelihood that it could occur because you have a donor or a funder who's interested in giving you some seed dollars there, right? So, it kind of helps to articulate the reason for doing it. Again, these are just, very discrete sample examples, but we want to be putting in some of our more some of our more difficult decisions in here as well, and building these out. They follow the same rubric. I've given you a blank template here. We have a full Excel template for you to fill out on your own. And we'll, and leave you to that there. Moving on. So I want to spend a little bit of time here. We talked about those difficult conversations that our organizations are having around, am I able to make it through the crisis? Will I be able to reemerge? How do I navigate this conversation? And we wanted to, and thank you to the folks at the council, because they really, prompted some of this thinking, and we're partners in this. I wanted to give you some thoughts on how we might go through a series of questions or reflections for us, as leaders and managers of organizations. So first, we want to start with cash, right? Like, do we have enough cash or access to cash to manage our organizations to a point of reopening, right? So can we get through this response period to a point of reopening, right? So we looked at those scenarios, we made those assumptions around how long the social distancing will last. Can we manage to a point of reopening? If we can, then we'll talk about that in a moment. But if it's not possible for us, the next logical question is, can we access cash from outside sources? And will it be enough to carry our core operations of reopening and kind of initial re-engagement to operations? So let's say that that's true. And then given those, given that we're able to open, are we able to, you know, do we believe that our current or a slightly modified business or programmatic model is able to work in a post-COVID world, right? So right now we don't really know what that post-COVID world is going to look like, but it's going to be changed. And I think day by day that's revealing itself to us. But we're thinking about our programs, right? Are we going to be able to assemble the same way that we were able to assemble 6 or 12 weeks ago? Is our business model going to be able to modify itself easily to accommodate that? Or do we need to explore more drastic changes to our business or programmatic model, right? And if that's the case, can we, do we have or can we raise the working and change capital to establish a new, you know, business or program model? And if that's the case, then it seems like, you know, we are safe harboring to that end. If it's not possible to raise that cash, you know, to a point of reopening, and if it doesn't seem possible that we're able to modify, you know, our business and programmatic model to operate in a post-COVID world, then we have some other questions to ask ourselves. One is around, what is it, you know, where is our, do we have the community support, right? Like, is there really community support for our work? And, you know, what can we depend on the community to kind of support us in that transformation? That goes to, you know, raising those dollars. The second question that we're going to be asking ourselves is, you know, are there peer organizations interested in shepherding our programs? If there are peer organizations, if we're not able to open or believe that, you know, we're not able to operate in that post-COVID world the way that we would imagine, if there are peer organizations that might be interested in shepherding our programs, might there be a more formal partnership or merger that could carry our programs forward? So that might be an option. But if not, then we have to think about what a soft landing might look like for our organization. So what would it mean? So the question there is, what would it mean for our organization to responsibly cease operations? So again, there's probably another 100 questions underneath all of these. But again, to try to give just an initial guide of, you know, what as leaders and managers, how are we starting to think about what our options are? Again, not a definitive, like, check the box guide. There's so much nuance beyond this. But this is really born out of a lot of questions that I'm getting, that we're getting. And how boards can start to boards and leadership should start to think about this. So, just a moment. Last week, we got some really good questions about decision making and how to make decisions in times of crises. I recognize that a lot of these decisions are being made over Zoom. Or on the phone, and absent a facilitator. So I work a lot with groups, especially in high pressure and emotional situations. And it's one thing that I've learned over the years is that like when the stakes are high, so are emotions. So I really wanted to share just some of the learnings as a facilitator and some of the best practices that we can practice on our own when we are having high stakes conversations amongst ourselves. So first is really just acknowledge that there's a lot of anxiety and emotion involved in these conversations. And everyone expresses emotion differently. Some people are quiet, some people are chatty, some people are angry and short. Some people are, get their quirky sense of humor comes out, but like acknowledge the emotion in the room. And then also acknowledge or ask everyone's like interest or hope in like for the outcome, right? So just get it all on the table. And you might have people who say, I really want to keep the organization open, you know, at all costs. Or somebody might say, you know, I'm just looking to do whatever, you know, I'm looking to agree with what everybody else wants. I want to go along with the group. But really get people to say, if they can, you know, what their personal goal is. And I think that is a good way of trying to set the table. Don't force anybody to say anything, but acknowledge the emotion and really try to get everyone to articulate what they would like or their interest in the situation. Also, ensure that everybody has a job, right? And that we all know what everybody's role is, right? Who is the one that has decision rights? Like, what is the role of management? What is the role of board? If staff is involved, what is the role of staff? Acknowledge and articulate everybody's role so that everybody knows what everyone's job is in the room. And third, this is really sometimes an area that requires a little bit of work, which is what is the goal we are working toward? And how are we going to get there? So the goal could be, we are going to take this week, or we are going to take this meeting to clearly and for all of us to understand our current financial situation and to agree on steps, to agree on next steps, or agree on our plan for the next 2 weeks, right? It could be that simple. Or it could be, we are going to, our goal is to understand our current financial situation and agree whether or not we are going to furlough or lay off staff, right? So it is being really articulate, to agree on the goal. But if you can't agree on the goal, agree on what the guide rails are going to be. We are not going to talk about, you know, the founder's intention when creating this organization. We are not going to talk about the event that happened in the past. Those things that you know derail conversations, so that you can continue to move a conversation forward. And finally, part of I think we put pressure on ourselves to make decisions quickly, and I feel that decisions, sometimes we need to give people space. So feel free to sleep on it or take frequent breaks, and revisit it, right? So if you need to take a break, a 10-minute break, walk around tell everybody to go outside and take a walk around their house or walk around the block with their mask on, then you need to do that. But give yourself a break, give your team a break. When we were putting this together, you know, we got some questions around, you know, what are board members' responsibility, and, you know, staff responsibility. So I just wanted to share kind of some of those, you know, quick tips, right? Our board members, you know, have the responsibility to make decisions based on objective information. So it's our responsibility as management to make sure they have objective information. You know, thinking about board members to make sure that they're, you know, that they take the long-term view, that there's a role of proper oversight, that they are informed and they know the financial situation. They are, you know, stewarding the assets of the program, and then they act in the best interests of the organization, right? So they are really acting as those agents of the organization. And then the board's role in the crisis is, you know, being able to answer these questions. Do I know how we got you know, from a planning perspective and decision making, do I know how I got to these scenarios? So if we have board members on the call today, you know, you're going to want to know how did we get to these scenarios? And that's your right to know. Like, help me understand how we got here. Do I understand how these numbers were calculated? You know, do I see the link between the scenarios and the strategy? You know, are these numbers realistic, right? Like, can I double click into these? What are the assumptions behind them? And then, you know, like, poke it a little bit. Like, what are the risks to the organizations? Where could we fall down on this? You know, are there risks to long-term viability? And is that a risk worth taking? Or are we better off making another choice, like right now? And then, you know, what are our plans? What are our triggers? Our A's to B's to C's. So moving on, we're going to talk a little, we're going to end our time together talking about our financial story. So this is really crucial, being able to pull this all together, talk about your plan, and use it in a compelling way to share your financial story with your board, your staff, funders, and constituents. And be it a safe harbor story or a soft landing story, it is, they follow kind of a similar kind of a narrative thread. We have done financial storytelling with organizations for a number of years. And so I would want to, we have kind of reimagined this for COVID. It follows a pretty standard arc. So the first is really the past. And we don't want to spend so much in the past because we all kind of know, you know, we're really talking about the present situation and what the impact of COVID on our current finances and our current situation. But you do really want to talk about where you were right prior to the pandemic, and the impact of the pandemic on your operations and financial health. You're going to want the data that you're using to inform this is, of course, like, you know, your past financial statements and your past budget. This is what we intended to do, but here's how COVID kind of impacted us. The present is your typical or current business model, right? So you may be, you know, you might be a performing arts organization that, you know, planned 5 shows this year, but due to COVID, you were unable to, you know, put on 3 out of your 5 shows. And then like further, like just sharing how addressing COVID-19 has impacted your organization. This is where you're going to be folding in, you know, your revised budget, your cash flow projection, your balance sheet, the overall health and strength of your organization, and then your scenarios and your contingencies. Like, here's how we are addressing it. This has been the impact, and this is how we are addressing things in the short term. And then finally, we go to the future. Given where we are now, this is how we see our future. Our short-term future in 3, 6, 9 months based on the scenarios as we see them. And then here's how we see this playing out in our future cash needs, in our future budgets, and what we will need to be able to open, you know, after the pandemic ceases. Right? So the past, the present, and the future, and weaving in that financial story all the way. So what does this look like, and how do we do it? So 1, lead with mission and program. For those who have worked with NFF before, you know that our stand-in example is Wonderland. And I will just read through kind of we have the Wonderland Community Arts Center. So the Wonderland Community Arts Center provides high quality performances and classes to the towns of Aville, Beeville, and Seaville. Our stellar staff is made up of part-time teachers, actors, and artists, and we have 2 professional administrators and a small facilities team that cares for our accessible, welcoming space. COVID-19 brought our operations to a standstill. We weren't able to conduct classes or hold performances. Our revenue has dried up and 60% of our clients have asked for refunds. Our facility is closed. Absolutely, like, just straight up telling the story succinctly. You know, while we have, and then how did they respond? While we have a modest facilities and operating reserves, in order to meet cash flow needs, our board made the tough decision to furlough and lay off most of our staff, except for 1 administrator, 1 facilities person, and 1 back office staff. Meanwhile, we applied for the PPP and have planned contingency budgets to get us through the next 3, 6, and 9 months. At 9 months, though, we are completely out of funds, fully tapping our line of credit. The board is monitoring this closely and meeting weekly. We are concerned that we will not be able to reopen or attract back our audiences once we do because of the fears of social distancing. Our community may be incredibly impacted by the looming recession because of our high population of new Americans and immigrants. We are looking for 2 things: operating dollars to keep us going while we are closed, and fund to help us pivot so we can think through how we might change programming so that when we are able to open, we can meet clients at a place that is comfortable and safe. So it seems very kind of structured, and that's intentional because we recognize that talking about money is not comfortable, but really leading with mission. What do you do? Thinking about what happened, how they responded, and the effect on mission. There can be a longer story here for this organization in particular. At 9 months, they are completely out of funds. We could expand this and say they're completely out of funds and would have to close permanently. And you know, that could be a draw out of this financial story for sure. If I look at a soft landing story, the Wonderland Regional Dance Theater, a 30-year-old school and regional traveling dance troupe, provides accessible instruction to children and adults, and in the summer months brings dance to unconventional spaces throughout the tri-state region. COVID brought our operations to a standstill. We weren't able to conduct our spring classes, and our entire summer schedule was canceled. We are an organization that relies mostly on earned revenue, entirely on earned revenue, and our summer touring subsidizes our school scholarships. They responded by saying that, you know, Wonderland, that, you know, we have a beneficial agreement with our landlord who has agreed to release us from our lease, and we have notified our families that we will no longer be able to offer classes this year and are taking a pause. Our board is considering our options. Our founder, Mr. Glick, is nearing retirement, and he believes that this may be time for the organization to retire as well. The board is considering options for placing assets such as dance and music equipment, as well as videos and memorabilia. The board recognizes that, and the effect on its mission is that the board recognizes that the absence of our organization means that many children and adults may not be able to receive dance instructions, and so we are working with the local cultural council and community foundation to meet with our other dance groups to see if they would be interested in hearing about our programmatic model and the success we've had with, in hope that they would steward our approach. And then what do they need? While we could close our doors tomorrow and walk away, we want to close responsibly. We are asking for $15,000 to ensure that we close responsibly, file all the necessary paperwork, and steward our assets and legacy. So again, you know, mission, what happened, response, effect on mission, and then really what is needed. So finally, communicating early and often, engaging the staff in conversations for sure, thinking about the board, and then staying in front of funders and not pulling back. Always the kind of, you know, the royal 3 that we need in our communications strategy. So with that, we have about, 13 minutes. I know that there might be a couple of questions coming through, and I'm happy to answer anything that comes up.
Great, thank you so much, Sandy. Again, we've gotten some few questions that have come in, but this is a good opportunity to post your questions that we have right now. Just a little tidbit of information. We're recording this one, and it'll be up this afternoon. We'll be emailing you a copy of this so you can send it out. And as Kaylin mentioned on the chat box, we're doing this webinar again at 2 o'clock today, just because we knew that folks couldn't make the morning. So we wanted to make sure that we offered, it's going to be very similar, if not the same. So if you want to send people to our 2 o'clock webinar today, that would be great. We're also putting this out in a series of blogs that'll be coming out in the next couple of weeks of really unpacking the learning from each one of our webinars. And we're going to be putting that on the Mass Cultural Council's website as we go along. So Sandy,
yeah,
you want to head into the Q&A?
Yeah, so there's a PPP question, and it's a tricky one. We are a second or even third job for some part-time hourly employees. Even after we get our PPP money and have the ability to pay them their basic wage, it may make more sense for a few employees to stay on unemployment since their other jobs are not in the same place as we are. Any suggestions on how to reconcile their situation and what we need to do as an organization to qualify for PPP forgiveness? Great question. So I don't know how to advise you on that because there's very little guidance coming out from the SBA on this. And I mean, there's some guidance on, there's certainly guidance on the SBA and what you have to do to qualify for the forgiveness, right? So that it is maintaining a level of payroll, and that payroll amount has to be above 75% of the award, and then the remaining line items have to qualify, right? So utilities, rent, mortgage interest expense. But I don't know. I don't know how to advise you on that part-time hourly employee there. We work with one of our collaborators or one of our partners, consulting partners is more of an accounting expert, and I might ask them, Caitlin, I don't know if you have the link to the FMA online resource, and I would point you there because they are just more like technical on those types of payroll questions. So that's where I would send you. Let's see. When it comes to budgeting a 3, 6, 9 month out, are there certain benchmarks you can suggest to help us choose when to move from our 3-month plan to our 6-month plan? For example, if by July XYZ doesn't happen, we should move from our 6-month plan to open in September or a 9-month plan. That's a really great question. I am one to constantly revise, right? So I would say that what is your, like, the 3-month plan is that you are assuming that you're able to resume operations in 3 months. And as that time frame is going, right? So you're 12 weeks out, and then you're 11 weeks out, then you're 10 weeks out, and then keep asking yourself, am I still 10 weeks out from when I assume I'm opening? And if the answer is yes, keep sticking with that budget. If the answer is no, ask yourself, do I have to move my budget another, do I have to just move the end date of my budget out another couple of weeks? Or do I need to go to my 6-month budget, right? So you can always, the way the template works is that you can always move out you can always just look out a couple weeks, right? So I'm always asking myself as a manager, or I sit on a number of boards, where are we today? Like, what are we thinking our best chances to reopen? And so, like, what's my horizon? So always be asking yourself, like, what is that horizon? So are the soft landing and other stories instruments to convey the issues with the stakeholders or the final result of the scenario planning once a decision has been made? I would say both, right? So you can use those. It's really a financial storytelling tool. We have had organizations use them as conversation starters with funders. I just talked with a funder yesterday who worked with a client who said, listen, that used a similar script for an organization that was in trouble and going to them to release some funds. So that's an example of an organization that used that script to to ask for kind of relief in releasing unrestricted funds to operations, right? So it's a format. It is a format that can be used in many environments. Our organization has not considered or discussed a soft landing or closing permanently. Should we be? Are we being naive or ignoring the writing on the wall? I can't answer that for you because I don't know. I don't know I don't know your situation. I know that many organizations have come to me with that question, and I think it's I think you have to reflect on your cash position and the reality of reentry and reopening, given how long we might be in this current response period. So we received funding from the SBA from the disaster loan program. It was deposited in our bank account with no contact or paperwork, not the full 10,000. Not sure how to understand why we received a lesser amount. Any advice? Oh my gosh, that's the first time I've heard of that. No, I mean, well, there's a general number at the SBA. You should be able to get a number, like a loan number or a number from your bank that should be able to trace that money, that you should be able to reference it somehow. But I would want to go and reach out to the SBA to see what that money is all about. We did hear that there have been some modifications to the EIDL, if that's the program that you applied to directly to the SBA, but we have not gotten guidance on that, or we have not really seen guidance on what those modifications have been.
Great, and this is kind of a last chance, so if you want to enter in your questions, that'd be great. One of the things that we're hearing now, which I think is a wonderful idea, and as I mentioned yesterday, really stuck with me, and that is reaching out to your stakeholders right now through Zoom or other platforms. So of course your board and major donors, but every constituent in your organization, and asking them what kind of conditions would they feel comfortable coming back to? You know, what is that environment? What does that look like? Just beginning those conversations, even to your subscribers or the folks that are closest to your organization, to understand what mental space they're in. Of course, things are changing all the time, but just kind of getting an idea of what does that recovery look like for your particular organization, what are people feeling, and how you may integrate some of that in your decision-making plans of when you reopen, what that reopening looks like. So, and then in that particular case that someone shared with us earlier, it was a great way for those folks to help design what that reopening would look like, and also provide some financial fundraising in order to help the organization be able to make it to that point. So if you're thinking about planning what your recovery looks like, we would highly suggest reaching out to your community now to show that you're thinking of the light at the end of the tunnel, that you're working together to get to that spot, and their feedback is very valuable to help you and your decision makers in planning what that future actually looks like.
So there's another question that came in around PPP loan forgiveness, and it says, in order to get the full forgiveness that we calculated in our application, do we need to make sure that we maintain approximately the same total payroll that we had previously? For example, if we have staff who choose to go part-time during our closure for personal reasons, do we risk having our total forgiveness amount go down if we don't hire someone else to take those hours? Or if we have a salaried staff member who is planning to leave, do we need to make sure we fill that position as quickly as possible, or risk having our forgiveness amount lowered? So those are great questions. Those questions should come out in the formal guidance, and we only have draft guidance out right now. So I think the answer there is still, I don't know, and and that's one to ask with your SBA lender.
And Sandi, can you tell us, obviously Mass Cultural Council, and we've been presenting these webinars, are there any other additional resources from the Nonprofit Finance Fund? I'm sure you have a website where you've been putting a lot of these tools and templates and materials together. So if folks want to continue this and look a little deeper or get additional resources from NFF, what kind of resources are available for them?
Yeah, so we have nff.org, and from our website, you will see a little banner that follows you everywhere. It takes us right to the COVID-19 page. NFF has we just did a webinar on debt and different instruments, different debt instruments. If you're questions on lines of credit or bridge loans or traditional debt, So there is that. There is a webinars tomorrow and Friday on just general management. It doesn't necessarily go into as much depth as these webinars did. There is a kind of a help email line called Ask NFF. It's asknff@nff.org, where you can just email and ask a general finance question, and an NFF consultant will get back to you. So that's for quick and dirty questions. I would just advise you to kind of get on our email list. We try not to blast out too many emails, but we're constantly updating our resource page. We have links to, we kind of curate the best, what we think are kind of the best and most reliable SBA resources, resources from like independent sector, National Council of Nonprofits, where we think that there's just a lot of good reputable information out there. At this moment, there are, kind of all the intermediaries and consultants are coming together to say, like, we don't want to duplicate efforts. We want to work together and make sure that we can coordinate resources and just get as much good information out to the field as possible.
Great. And one last item here for our portfolio and our gateway organizations, and I know a lot of our portfolio organizations are here today. Part of our Safe Harbors program, in addition to these webinars, is really providing some individualized consulting assistance with Sandi and her team at NFF. So if you are in the portfolio, in the Mass Culture Council Cultural Investment Portfolio, you should have received an email from either me, Kaylin, or Sarah with that. If you have not, please follow up with us and we will send you that, because we do know that some of your work is very unique and specific to your business model and your discipline. So we want to provide these webinars, but also some integrated consulting with the team at NFF. So please take advantage of that opportunity as well. No more questions are on here, so thank you all for joining our webinar today. We really do appreciate you coming out. I know soft landing is something that we don't want to look at yet, but part of our due diligence here at the Commonwealth is to make sure what that may look like and how we help you do that responsibly. But we are pushing for that safe harbor and trying to get us through this period of time, because we all know that we need arts, culture, humanities, and sciences even more on the back end as we do come out of this recovery, which we will. And it's our job to make ourselves human again. So thank you all for all of your hard work and keeping up with us. And if there's anything that Mass Culture Council can do for you beyond some of the things that we're doing, please let us know. We're so excited to take a look at anything that you want to offer up. So have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you very soon. Thank you very much.